A gute Woche. Rabbi Gesundheit began the Farbrengen this afternoon that today is 14 days in the month of Elul. Chazal tell us that 30 days before Yom Tov, Shoyalem v'dershin behilchas hachag, we're supposed to start learning and inquiring in the halachas of the oncoming Yom Tov 30 days prior to the Yom Tov. Being that Elul is a chasar, Elul does not have 30 days. Elul has 29 days. So the 14th day in Elul is 30 days before Sukkot, which comes out 15 days in Tishrei. So actually, as of today, we have to begin our preparations for the Yom Tov of Sukkot. Yom Tov Bichlal, as the expression goes, Moyadim L'Simcha, Yom Tov in general is an inyan of Simcha. How much more so is it when we are talking about Sukkot? Because amongst Yom Tovim itself, Sukkot has the title of Moyadim L'Simcha. As we recite in davening, which davening is something which was set up by the Anshe Knesset Agdolah. Prior to that, everybody had his text, how they addressed themselves to the Rebishter. It wasn't in an unorganized way. However, after the Anshe Knesset Agdolah have set up a text of Tefillah, which this is Shaveh L'chol Nefesh, this is equivalent for everyone follows the same text, we say in the davening of Sukkot, that Sukkot is called Zman Simchaseinu. So when we're talking about preparing ourselves for the Yom Tov of Sukkot, it's this Yom Tov that has this outstanding Maila in it, that the Yom Tov is called the Zman of Simcha. Especially this year, that we're in the year of Hakel, the year of Tismach and Tesamach. And regarding Yom Tovim, we find, the Pasuk says that comes Yom Tov, you should gather everyone, you should gather your entire family and your slaves and everyone that's close to you, and everyone to celebrate the Yom Tov together with them. So what does this bring out? This brings out the concept of uniting everyone together. This is the idea of Hakel. So in the year of Hakel especially, we have to properly prepare ourselves for the Yom Tov of Sukkot, for the Yom Tov of Simcha. Even though Shabbos, we also celebrate with our entire family. And Shabbos we also know involves not only the person himself, but we know there are the halachas of Shabbos pertaining to the behemoths we own. So they are also involved, affected by the Shabbos. But nonetheless, we cannot compare the way it is Shabbos to the way it is Yom Tov. Shabbos, even though the Sifri tells us, based on the pasuk of Yom Simchaschem, he interprets that the days of Simcha Elu HaShabbosos, but nonetheless, Shabbos primarily it is Oineg. Oineg means more of an inner kind of a joy, as opposed to Simcha, which we have on Yom Tov. And this is also expressed in the fact that Yom Tov it's brought in Shulchan Aruch that it's appropriate to have orchim, hachnosas orchim, to have guests at our table, at the Yom Tov table. Even though orchim is all year round, it's always something which is very appropriate, but nonetheless we cannot compare it the way it stands all year round, or the way it stands Shabbos, to the obligation of having guests at our table on Yom Tov. So again, Yom Tov brings out the concept of uniting with more people. And this is the whole idea of Hakel. Hakel is also to unite. The Rebbe brings out, the expression goes, Shoyalin v'dorshin behilches hachag shloishim yoyim koydem hachag. We are supposed to inquire and research into the halachas of Yom Tov 30 days before the Yom Tov. The expression is Shoyalin v'dorshin. This corresponds to the concept that there is a pasuk Tzion doiresh ein lo. Pasuk is talking about the destruction of Yerushalayim, the destruction of Tzion. So the pasuk uses the expression Tzion does not have anyone that is a doiresh to Tzion, meaning anybody that is inquiring into Tzion, that's taking an interest in Tzion. So Chazal add on to this pasuk, being that this is what the pasuk says, Michlal, from here we see the ba'i drisha, that what should be is that we should inquire into tzion, we should look after tzion and inquire. In other words, this is referring to the concept of golus and giyula. In other words, we should look into this thing and see to it that we take an interest in tzion. So the Rebbe is tying together the expression of tzion doirish ein la, the expression of shloishim yoim koydem achag, we have to be shoyel v'doirish. The same expression, doirish and doirish. The Rebbe is teaching that this is also a reminder, being that it has to do with this inyan. So by us preparing ourselves properly to the inyan of shoyel and v'doirishim, doirish, same idea as tzion doirish ein la. By us preparing ourselves properly to celebrate the Yontif of Sukkot, and this is a Yontif which we celebrate, the stress of Simcha is very obvious. Even though what we are doing is we are learning the halachas of the Yontif, but nonetheless, being that this Yontif deals with Simcha, so learning the halachas of such a Yontif also brings us to Simcha. And this also leads and helps to get us out of Golus. We should be able to fulfill tzion doirish ein la mechlal de ba'i drisha. In other words, this also gets us a step closer out of Golus and brings us closer to Giyul. It's here or later in the Farbrengen where the Rebbe, it's probably later, where the Rebbe brought out that when we're talking about Mashiach, Mashiach has the same letters as Sameach, as Simcha. We will get to it in a few minutes, where the Rebbe is stressing very strongly the inyan of Simcha. Especially on this day, today, is Yudalit Elul, as mentioned. Yudalit Elul comes after Yud Gimel Elul. Yud Gimel Elul is the day when the Frierdiker Rebbe got married. And that is when his father, the Rebbe Rashab, began saying, there's a famous Hemshech of Mamorim, which the Frierdiker Rebbe's father, the Rebbe Rashab, said at Frierdiker Rebbe, began to say at the Frierdiker Rebbe's wedding, and continued at quite a few other occasions. And this Hemshech is referred to as Samach to Samach. And it says, even though it seems that when the Rebbe Rashab began to say the Hemshech, when he said it orally, the first Maimah did not begin with the word Samach to Samach Re'em Ahuvim, but rather began with V'hu Kechoson Yotze Mechu Pasai. But nonetheless, when the Rebbe Rashab put it into writing, he began the Hemshech with Samach to Samach. While referring to the Frierdiker Rebbe's wedding, Rebbe says that this year the Kviyas is the same way as it was 91 years ago when the Frierdiker Rebbe got married. And then also Yud Gimel Elul came out to be on a Friday, and Yud Daled was on a Shabbos. The Rebbe says it would be worthwhile to research when Taka was the wedding of the Frierdiker Rebbe. To make a wedding late Friday night, Al Pi Halacha would not allow to make a wedding. To say that the wedding was Friday afternoon, the Rebbe says it's strange, it's not a popular time to make a wedding. So Mamela, the Rebbe says it would be worthwhile to look into when Taka was the wedding of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and for those that will find some sort of an information, it's advisable that they should share it with others. And therefore, the Rebbe suggested to print it in the various periodicals and the various Teitzei publications that are being published with comments and referrals and research on these type of inyanim and inyanim that deal with sichas and amorim and so forth. Today is the day of the 14th in Elul. From this 14th in Elul, we are coming to tomorrow, which is the 15th in Elul. 15th in Elul is the day that Kaima Siya Rabashli Musa. That is the day when the moon stands in its completeness. So again, these are appropriate days of special significance. We mentioned that in this Hemshech of Samach to Samach, over there the Rebbe Rashab also brings out the importance and the greater inyanim that are achieved at a chasana, and why Taka we all rejoice so at a chasana, Samach to Samach, Re'em Ahuvim, even though Re'em means friends, Re'em Ahuvim, people that are friends, and there's a friendship a strong friendship amongst them. Nonetheless, we say when it comes to a chasana, how strong the friendship is between these two people and how strong the love is between these two people comes to a chasana, they too rejoice even yet more. The ave and the reus and the friendship amongst these two people becomes yet stronger. So in this Maimatak of Samach to Samach, that is where the Rabbi Rashab brings out all the great inyanim that are accomplished through a chasana, to the extent that even Reyem or Ahuvim, they too also rejoice. Their ave, the simcha, becomes yet stronger as a result of chasana. Later, the second sikha the Rebbe referred to began that says Bichlal by Chassidim we look to tie in every inyan and to refer it to Nasi Dereinu, to the Nasi. Sometimes we search a little more, sometimes we search a little less. And the Rebbe says really there's no need to search for this inyan. Why? Because Hanasi hu hakoil, Nasi is everything. Every and any inyan which we discuss automatically has a shaykhus to the Nasi. And here the Rebbe says it's regarding the inyan of constantly hoping for the coming of Mashiach, which years ago we don't find that there was any special stress other than the fact that Yidden would mention in davening what we say in davening where we ask for the coming of Mashiach. Even in later generations. Meaning, after the Baal Shem Tov, when it was already publicized, the letter of the Baal Shem Tov, where the Baal Shem Tov writes that the coming of Mashiach is dependent on Afotzas Hamayonos Chutza, nonetheless, we still don't find that there was a constantly demanding and referring to the coming of Mashiach, demanding for the asking that Mashiach comes. Even if we go through later Nesiim, even by the Frierdiker Rebbe, we also don't find that he constantly demanded and instructed Chassidim to insist and ask for the coming of Mashiach. But when the Frierdiker Rebbe arrived here in the United States, then the publication of Akriya v'Hakdusha was instituted by the Frierdiker Rebbe. It was a special publication which he urged to be published here in the United States first years that he was here. And there the Rebbe came out with the motto of La'alta L'tshuva, La'alta L'gula, which means that we should all immediately respond to do tshuva, and automatically this will lead La'alta L'gula, immediately to Gula. So we see here that the Rebbe put it all into one word, one quotation. There are no words between La'alta L'tshuva, La'alta L'gula, which means that this inyan comes together. Once we will accomplish the La'alta L'tshuva, automatically it will lead to La'alta L'gula. The Rebbe referred to a story which took place in the times of the Arizal, where there was one of the disciples of the Arizal who also insisted very strongly on bringing Mashiach. Rabbi Yosef Delirano, if I remember the name correctly. And it did not work out. The Rebbe says it's brought in Svarim, based on what the Gemara says, that one is not supposed to be a doichek es ha-kates. Kates means a set time for when Mashiach comes. So one is not supposed to do things to expedite this time and rush it that it should come early. So by this Rabbi Yosef Delarano, it did not work out, and he was accused of being a dochak es ha-kates. Today the Rebbe says we cannot look at it that way, because kvar kolu kol ha-katesim, all the katesim, all the set dates for the coming of Mashiach, all the times have already passed. And Mashiach still did not come. So the question arises, what should we do? We know that the Rebishter does not demand from us more than we could do. The Rebbe asks from us that whatever we should do, it is within our koiches. True, fully kemitzvas ritzeinecha, exactly what the Rebbe wants 100%. This cannot be done while Yidden are in Golus. This is only something which we were able to do when we were in Eretz Yisrael. And when Mashiach will come and we will again be in Eretz Yisrael, then we could fulfill fully the wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, kemitzvas ritzeinecha. But as much as it is within our power, we have done. And still Mashiach did not come. Va'adayin loiba. Rebbe says so there is one other Teitzei that is left, which we can do, and this will bring Mashiach. And let us try this, let us prove this, let us use this Teitzei and see that this Teitzei should bring Mashiach. And that is through simcha, through happiness. We know there are categories, there are levels of simcha. There's an inyan of simcha shel mitzvah, when we fulfill a mitzvah to have simcha. There's an inyan that when we learn Torah brings to simcha. P'chudei Hashem yisharem mesamchei leiv. Learning Torah brings joy. But this is not the type of simcha we're talking about now. Now we're talking about a specific simcha, is simcha to bring Mashiach. We're going to say, how can we be besimcha? Shchinte begalusa. The Shchin is in Golas. Yidden are in Golas. We're in such dark times of Golas. How can we demand simcha? But there's no other alternative. There's no other alternative, and we have no breira. And let us try this, and this will bring to the coming of Mashiach. Again, everybody can be productive within his limits, within his capacities, whatever everyone has. So the Rebbe used an expression. There are those that can only have a little kelishikl. A kelishikl is a little cup. A small cup is called a kelishikl. So there are those people that their capacity is a little kelishikl. There are those people whose capacity is a huge body. So naturally we cannot compare these two people one to another. One was given more koiches, one can be more productive, and one is in the position of being less productive. But nonetheless, everyone has to produce to his fullest capacity. And it's demanded from all of us to try now through simcha, and through simcha we will bring Mashiach. Rebbe added, we are Chassidim, so Chabad Chassidim. And a Chassid does everything b'his yashvos, especially according to Chabad, it should be in accordance to Chochma Bina Das. But again, even according to Chabad, al pi Chochma Bina Das, our inyan is to be b'simcha, and through simcha bring Mashiach. Simcha does not mean, Rebbe says, take one cup of mashke and another cup of mashke, and this will bring us to simcha. This is not the derech of a chassid. A chassid is nicht kein shikar. A chassid is not a drunk. Rebbe says, interesting, in halacha, where it's discussed if a person who was a little bit affected, intoxicated, a little bit affected of mashke, and halacha discusses if he's allowed to daven or he's not allowed to daven. So what's the expression in Shulchan Aruch? The expression in Shulchan Aruch is shikrusoi shel loit. We compare his shikrus. Is it equivalent to how shikar loit was, or is he less shikar than loit? What does this show us? This shows us that shikrus has a shaychus to loit. We are children of Avraham. And as children of Avraham, we don't have any shaychus to being shikr. But when we're talking about simcha, it means a person creating an inner simcha within himself, and this simcha be expressed bigolui, be expressed in an obvious way, and this simcha, a special simcha, a simcha to bring Mashiach. And this is what the Rebbe mentioned, what I mentioned earlier, that the word Mashiach has the letters of Sameach, which is the shayrish for the word of Simcha. Farbrengen says, the Rebbe continues, it's customary that we relate entire reunion into Pashas HaShavua. This week's Sedra, it is Pashas Teitzei. We mentioned Teitzei la Melchama alo Yivecha. Pasuk is discussing about going out into war. The Pasuk says, Al Oivecha. It was mentioned already last week. I mentioned it this week when he spoke to the children. The Pasuk uses the expression Al Oivecha. In other words, a Yid has to know that even though we're going out into a Melchama, we have a battle, we have a war, but we have to be confident that we will succeed. Al Oivecha, we will overcome our enemy. Well, let us look into Rashi. When Rashi explains this pasuk, Rashi says, "B'melchemes hareshus hakosav medaber." About what kind of a melchama is the pasuk talking about? About a melchama of reshus. Now, there were various categories of war which the Yidden had. There is what we would call a melchemes mitzvah and melchemes reshus. There are those melchames which the Yidden were obligatory to, it was a must, it was an obligation for them to do. For example, they had to have a melchama with the Canaanite nations to get them out of Canaan, to get them out of Eretz Yisrael, so that the Yidden should be able to take over Eretz Yisrael. Melchemes Reshus means it's something which is up to them. It's not, they weren't commanded to have this melchama. It was something which was decided by the melech or by the general, and they went into melchama for whatever specific reason which they had. So Rashi says that we have to say that this pasuk here, the psukim here, which talk about Eishes Yifas Toya, this is talking about a melchemes reshus, and it cannot talk about a melchemes mitzvah. Why? Because melchemes mitzvah we just touched means the melchama which the Yidden had when they took over, when they conquered Eretz Yisrael, when they captured Eretz Yisrael. We know that when the Yidden captured Eretz Yisrael, they were commanded loisechaya kol neshama, that they're not allowed to leave anybody alive, but they had to kill everyone. So if so, how is it possible that they should capture somebody and this woman should wind up being an Eishes Yifas Toya? At the time they were commanded that they had to kill everybody. So this is what leads Rashi to teach that by what kind of a melchama is it talking about? It's talking about a melchemes reshus and not a melchemes mitzvah. The Rebbe raised several questions in this scene. First of all, the Rebbe says, what type of an expression is it? Ki Teitzei la melchama. You will go out into war. Teitzei, it's not always Teitzei la melchama. Many times it's Savai la melchama. You enter into a war. The Yidden here, for example, are leaving the Midbar and they are entering Eretz Yisrael. Savayu la melchama. What type of an expression is Teitzei la melchama? Also, ki Teitzei la melchama aloivecha, Mesar Hashem elkecha biyadecha. Then the pasuk continues, Vishavisa shivyoy, he will capture somebody. These last two words of the first pasuk are also superfluous. They're extra. Pasuk could have right away continued to what's negay, to what the pasuk here is talking about. Here the Torah is coming to tell us the dinim of a Yifas Toya. So the pasuk could have continued, V'reisa b'shivya eishes Yifas Toya. Why? Every word in Torah is accurate. Why does the Torah mention the words V'shavisa shivya? Also, in melchemes mitzvah, there are two types of melchemes mitzvahs. There's the melchemes mitzvah which we just discussed, how the Yidden are conquering Eretz Yisrael. There's another category of melchemes mitzvah, which is when there's a tzar hatzoyre reschem, which means when an enemy comes and starts up with Yidden in Eretz Yisrael, Yidden have no alternative. Yidden must respond in order to save their lives. This type of a melchama is also a melchemes mitzvah. And by that melchama, but such type of a melchames mitzvah, there's already no halacha of loisechaya kol neshama. So therefore, what is forcing Rashi that it must be talking about a melchemes reshus, about a war which is not a mitzvah, but it's reshus In other words, the Yidden have a breira, they could go and enter such a war. They have a breira not to enter this type of a war. We could learn that it's talking about a Melchemes Mitzvah. But what kind of a Melchemes Mitzvah? Not the Melchemes Mitzvah of Kibush Eretz Yisrael, where there's a mitzvah of Leisachaya Kol Neshama. It could be talking by a Melchemes Mitzvah when Yidden are engaged in a war, Alatzar, Atzoyer Ereschem, with an enemy that started up with them. Furthermore, Rashi is forced to learn that it is talking about a Melchemes Rishus and cannot be talking about a Melchemes Mitzvah of conquering Eretz Yisrael, because when the Yidden conquered Eretz Yisrael, they were told, L'Sachaya Kol Neshama. Whom are they supposed to kill? Anyone that's a member of the 7 nations that resided in Eretz Yisrael. How about if a stranger from another country would be then in Eretz Yisrael? At that time, he would be in Eretz Yisrael. Yidden were not mechuyev to kill him. So it could be talking about a Melchemes Mitzvah, and taka the Melchemes Mitzvah of conquering Eretz Yisrael. And at the same time, are you going to ask me, the pasuk says, Leisachaya Kol Neshama, how can we have an Eishes Yifas Toya? We can have an Eishes Yifas Toya. How? Maybe she was from another nation, and she happened to be in Eretz Yisrael, and she in Canaan, in Eretz Yisrael, and when the Yidden taking over Eretz Yisrael, she happened to be there, and she's an Eishes Yifas Toya that the pasuk is talking about. And furthermore, if we would learn this way, we would understand Vishavisa Shivyoy. What's the Teitzei Vishavisa Shivyoy? You will capture his captives. In other words, the one who was a Shevi by the 7 Umois, because he wasn't really one of the 7 Umois. They kept him her as a captive because he was from a strange country. By them, now what will happen is Vishavisa Shivyoy. And this is what the pasuk is talking about, such type of a nation. The Rebbe did not get involved, in answering these questions, just raised these questions on Rashi, but explained the inyan of Teitzei la Melchama and the words of Rashi in Hayra b'nefesh ha'adam, what it means to us and how it relates to us in daily lives. Rashi tells us, Teitzei la Melchama b'melchemes harishus ha'kosav medaber. What does this mean? So the Rebbe teaches, we know we have a Melchama. We have a battle. Who is the battle with? Naturally with the Yetzer Hara. So there are those that will say, have a battle with the Yetzer Hara for when it's regarding to the fulfillment of mitzvahs. Mitzvahs asay, mitzvahs lois asay. So for that he's ready to have a battle with the Yetzer Hara. However, to have a battle with the Yetzer Hara, an inyonem of reshus, in other words, things which are not mitzvahs, they're neither mitzvahs, they're neither averas. Like the concept of bechol derochecha de'ayu, kol ma'asecha l'shem shemayim, worldly matters. However, we are told that they too have to be utilized for kedusha. Everything that a yid does has to be permeated with kedusha. There's a goal in everything that a yid does. The yid's life is guided by Torah. Torah's chayim, kehem chayenu ve'ech yameinu. Everything which we do in life, all our gashmis, the kinyonim, are all guided by Torah. So a person will say, he's ready to go into war, he's ready to go into a milchama, when is he ready to go into war? When there's some interference for a dvar mitzvah. The Rebbe used the expression, to go into a war, to get the Rebishter out of Golas. This is not mentioned in Shulchan Aruch. To get Yidden out of Golas, so he knows that the time will come, that when Yidden will do tshuva, that is when the Rebishter will take us out of Golas. But he should go and stop whatever he is doing. Stop learning. He could sit in his room, he could sit behind closed doors and sit and learn. So what do we say? No. Go ahead and be concerned. What should you be concerned about? Be concerned about the fact that Shchinta begalusa, that the Shchin is in Golus. So we'll say, where does it say in Shulchan Aruch that he has to be concerned that the Shechinah is in Golus and therefore he should do things and move around and have a Milchama with his Yetzirah to get the Shechinah out of Golus? Wo steht das? Where does it say something like this? And therefore to demand from him that he should stop what he's doing and get involved and help other people and help them in their milchama with the Yetzirah. On what? On inyanim of rishus, on inyanim which if we want we do them, if we don't want we don't do them. In other words, not obligatory responsibilities, but inyanim which are day-to-day worldly activities. Person may say, for this he's not ready to go into battle with the Yetzirah. So this is what the Torah tells us here. Ki Teitzei la milchama leivecha. And Rashi teaches and tells us, you know what type of a milchama we're talking about. We're obligated to go. It's our responsibility to be in battle with the Yetzirah, not only regarding inyanim of mitzvahs, even of a milchemes rishus, even inyanim of rishus, the milchemes rishus hakasav medaber. And at the same time, we are told that we should know that when we are involved in this war, it has to be, and it will be, aloivecha, that we will overcome our enemy, our hand will be on top, and as the pasuk continues, unesanei Hashem elekecha biyadecha, that the Rebishter will give him into your hand. As it's customary in Farbrengens, the Rebbe explanation of Zohar, commentary of his father. Happens to be that on Pashas Teitzei, there is no commentary of the Rebbe's father on the Zohar. The Rebbe says that, let us look back into Pashas Mishpatim, where he explains in Yonim that have a shayches to what is discussed in Pashas Teitzei. The Rebbe says it's regarding the concept of shatnez, which means that a garment which contains tzemer or pishtim, wool and linen, we're not allowed to wear. That is shatnez. Also, we told in the Torah, we're not allowed to go ahead and plow in the field with a shoyer and a chamoyer, an ox and a chamoyer together. What does this mean? In other words, we are told that tzemer and pishtim, wool and linen, is not something, when they are combined, a yid cannot use it. At the same time, we are told, comes to the mitzvah of tzitzis. Tzitzis, it is permitted to wear shatnez. It's permitted to take tzemer or pishtim and combine it into the garment of tzitzis. What does this show us? It shows us the great koyach, the great strength that the Rebbe has given to a Yidden through mitzvahs. Even though these two ingredients to be put together are prohibited, and we're not allowed to use it for our own use, so we say that when it comes to a mitzvah, a Yid is allowed to use it. What does this show? It shows that the koyach of the, what's the pshat we say we are not allowed to use it? It means that these two things don't go together. It's geht zusammen that we should be able to wear on our bodies a garment that has tzemer and pishtim together. It's a harmful ingredient for us. At the same time, we are told, come to a mitzvah. No, a yid is bekoyach to convert in yonim that are opposites one to another. An ingredient which one with another does not agree, because we're not allowed to wear it. But when it comes to a mitzvah, a yid is given these koiches that he can wear it and it is permitted for him to wear. Regarding Pirkei Avos, I have brought out a brief thought that from now until Rosh Hashanah, we will be reciting Pirkei Avos 2 prokim every Shabbos. We have today plus 2 more Shabbosim, and today we're beginning again Pirkei Avos. So in order for us to complete the cycle of Pirkei Avos again, today we say 2 prokim, next week 2 prokim, and then the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah again 2 prokim, so we have completed all the 6 prokim. We just brought out that in today's prokim, begins with Moshe Kibbel Torah Misinai. It's brought in Chazal that when Moshe received the Torah, that was the final step of Briyas HaOlam. In other words, until the Rebbe did not give the Torah, the world was kind of shaky. When did the world become? What was the final stage of creation? That is when the Rebbe gave the Torah through Moshe Rabbeinu to the Yid. So actually, when we're talking Moshe Kibbel Torah Misinai, it really means we're going back all the way to the beginning of the creation of the world. The conclusion of the second Perek is, Perek 2 concludes, know that the giving of the reward to the righteous will be in the world to come. In other words, the Rebbe is bringing out how these two prakim encompass the entire Bria, the entire creation. We're talking from the beginning of the creation because Matan Torah traces back to the beginning of creation. This was the Gemar of the Bria, until the step of Matan Schoren Shel Tzadikim, the reward of Tzadikim, which will be in the world to come. When we say two prakim, not only do we say one perek, but we say two prakim, meaning of kiflayim l'teshiyah, double that brings a Yeshua, brings an assistance. The Rebbe also explained a Rambam. In today's Shia Rambam, and also brought out the lesson in Avodas Hashem which we can derive from this Rambam. It's in the halachas of Tumah. And here the Rambam brings out Hanitzuk einei chibo loy letuma v'loy letar. Nitzuk would mean some sort of a pipe. If you have a pipe and you're pouring water, you're pouring a liquid through it, the Rambam goes on to explain. He would take pure mashke, pure liquid, and pour it through this nitzuk, and pour it into a vessel which is tameh. The nitzuk still remains tahir, even though this nitzuk is kind of like connecting to the vessel which is tameh, and we are pouring water through the hose, through this pipe, and this water is reaching a tameh dikekeli. We don't say that the hose or the pipe is joined as part of the keli, but the nitzuk is not affected. The nitzuk remains tahir. The same thing, the opposite. However, the Rambam says, when is this? If he pours from cold to cold, or from hot to hot, or from hot to cold. However, if one would pour cold liquid through this pipe, through this hose, and when it comes into the vessel, the water becomes hot. It's a hot dish on the bottom. So we say that this hot dish on the bottom, the hot water on the bottom, affects the notzuk, affects the hose, and the hose also becomes tumah, and carries the tumah through the beginning to whatever we are beginning to pour through. Halach and Hilchos Tumas Eichlin. The Rebbe explained it, what it means to us, and how it relates in Avodas Hashem. What means Maila and what means Mata, we understand. Mata is this world, and Maila is Ruchnius. In order for the world to be created, and in order for the world to exist, there is a need for a nutzuk. This nutzuk is the pipeline which is carrying the which is between Maila and Mata, between the Rabbeinu Shalom and the world, between Boirei and Nivra, between the Creator and whatever He has created. So we say, normally, we disregard this chibur. In other words, the Rebishter has instilled the world in what type of a way that He's letting the world run on its own. Because should this nitzuk, should this pipeline be a chibur, be an attachment, then the Rebbe says the entire concept of prira will disappear. The Rebishter does not want it that way. The Rebishter wants that every person has his choice. And it should be based on our own decision of Achata B'Chaim. However, there is one exception. The case where the bottom is hot and there's cold water which is pouring through the pipe, reaching on the bottom into a hot dish. What's the taich? Hot and cold when we're talking in Ruchnius. Hot and cold in Ruchnius, the Rebbe says, when something is at its natural level, it is cold. Water, mitzad atzma, is cold. We know we have an area in Eretz Yisrael that's called Chamei Tveria. Tveria, the hot waters of Tveria. This is an issue in itself, the Rebbe says. We're not getting into it. But in general, Tzoinen is something which mitzad teva habriya, mitzad the way the world was created, it remains cold. When it becomes hot, what creates heat? It's the avodah of Yidden, the avodah of Neshamas Yisrael that creates heat. What are we told here? What are we saying here? When Yidden do their avodah, and Yidden create through the koiches that the Rebishter has given them, Yidden create an area of heat, and it becomes cham. So this cham reaches through the notzuk, and it affects all the way on top at the beginning of the pipe. At the beginning of the pipeline, it has an effect over there, even though over there it was originally cold. So kind of like the heat from the bottom travels all the way up. Basically, it's the concept which I explained today and explained last week at length. L'maisa yadecha tichsei. The Rebishter has an inner and strong desire that he enjoys the maisa yadayim from Yid. He enjoys the activity, the deeds and the acts of Yid. And when this is done, Yidden create a warm atmosphere. So we say when it's created warm on the bottom, so this does affect on top. This brings out by the Rebishter a tremendous feeling of satisfaction, tremendous feeling of appreciation, that this warmth from the bottom does travel through the pipeline to the beginning of the pipeline, meaning to Lamaila, to the Rebishter, and has an effect all the way up there. Why? Because this is what the Rebishter wanted, that the warmth which Yidden Abikoyach to create should travel all the way up and should bring him satisfaction, and this is the entire reason why the Rebishter created the world. The whole inyan, as the Rebbe spoke last week, the whole inyan of Nisava le'HaKadosh Baruch Hu liyos le'dira b'tachtonim. This is the Rebishter's desire. We can't ask no kashas on it. A famous expression from Alter Rebbe Rashab, of a taive fragt man nicht kein kasha. When one has a temptation, when one has a taive, you don't ask no kashas on it. It's stronger than a kasha. An inner desire, no kasha will destroy or disturb an inner desire. The same, it's the inner desire of the Rebishter to have his dwelling place, his dira, his place of rest, bitachtoinim, here in this world. And how is this brought out? When Yidden create a warm area. This is within the power of Yidden to create this chamin, this warmth. And this leads that Lamaila, there is also a satisfaction of it. So this is when the warmth which is created Lamata affects the top of the pipe, which is Lamaila by HaKadosh Baruch Hu.